You see these little children, bald head, tubes sticking out everywhere. It just breaks my heart. And it's one of the things that is near and dear to my heart is making something so the kids can put their beads in it. When they go through treatment, if they get a needle stick, they can get a bead. There's a whole list of different beads if you do beads of courage on Google. If they get a needle stick, they get a colored bead. If they lose their hair, they get beads. Some of these kids have literally hundreds to thousands of beads. And it's a way for them to tell their life story. And if we can bring a smile to their face, that's what it's all about. Us old folks, we're supposed to get cancer, not these little kids. So I encourage you to listen to what I've got here tonight and maybe make some for your club and take the SWAT. Now, where's this overhead at? I can see that, but I wanted to get the picture. This is a little girl from Indiana. Can we move the camera? This is a little girl from Indiana that was a special request. She loves horses, so this box went to Indiana. Her cousin, and I forget what the cancer they have. Her cousin also had a different type of cancer in her brain, and this is a box that she's got. Now, what really breaks my heart, this little boy right here, and I'll pass these around, whoever can take them. This little boy right here, unfortunately, he did not make it. But I made a Batman box for him and got it to him 2 weeks before he passed. And his grandparents it gives me chills thinking about it. His grandparents was with him most of the time because mom and dad had other kids in school. And they said that his smile just warmed their hearts. So that's what it's all about. Now, this little guy, like I say, he passed away. Now, there's another organization that makes a glass butterfly and puts a birth date and a passing date in the beads so that the parents or grandparents or whoever has a keepsake memento of that. So I'll pass this one around. Okay. Now, I've had a PDF file that has been downloaded onto your computer, and they're going to put it on your club website. Now, since I've made a lot of these, I've changed the PDF a little bit, so you're getting the first-hand knowledge of how I do some things different. But if you go through the PDF file, it has all the pictures that you need and explains a lot of it. So one of the first things that you need to consider is making well, you all have a safety classes here, don't you? Talk about face shields, breathing, and long hair, and gloves, and stuff like that. So I'm not going to cover a lot of that because I got a lot to cover and I want to try to get through it. So I make wooden jaws to be able to turn the PVC pipe. I start out with a square piece of wood, or rectangle actually, and I mark on this one here. This is for the Talon jaws. No, we need overhead again. This is for the, where are we at? Okay, I get it over here. I'm trying to figure out where your camera is. So this one's for Talon, and this is for the stronghold. And I will explain those a little bit later. For the stronghold is what you hold the PVC pipe. I'm kind of frugal. You know how to spell that? It's called cheap. So you can use jumbo jaws to hold the PVC to trim them up. But I like to use the wooden jaws because I can make them in several different times. Well, caution on that, never exceed the strength of the wood. I use hard maple for making these jaws. You don't want to use soft maple, and I like to use the grain in line with it. So to line that up, I take the largest jaw that I have for my stronghold or my Talon chuck, and I put magnets on it. You can get the round magnets from Home Depot or Lowe's and put on there. And what I do is after I cut these out, then I lay it up next to the wood, and I use a little center punch and just dimple it, and the magnet will pull it in there. So I dimple the wood. That gives me a place to drill, and then I use the tapered drill bit right here and a drill, and then I'll drill down through that. Now, and on these here, on one way, it uses a C drill bit. Now, if you have easy wood chucks and other chucks, you might have to use a different drill bit. And the screws that you get from Home Depot or Lowe's, and these are countersunk screws. So once I dimple it, then I'll drill through, and I'll countersink the wood. And if you have any questions, please let me know. So I'm going through this rather quick on how to make these. So once you put these on the chuck, I labeled them 1, 2, 3, and 4. And you want to leave them loose when you first put them on. And the reason is when you put this, well, I can do it this way. When you put it on the headstock, then you tighten the chuck down. Let me get it right over here. Tighten the chuck down to where all 4 corners come in line. And then tighten the screws down. That way it helps make sure it's in a line. These are metric screws from One Way, Canada stuff. That's why I say if you have a different type chuck, you need to find out what kind of screw that is and then use those screws accordingly. One Way is metric because it's from Canada, but that's what we go with. So I make this for the stronghold chuck, and this is for the Talon chuck. So you can see how they line up. And then when I get ready to turn to PVC, I'll be using these. But I wanted to kind of cover that first. Like I say, you can use your jumbo jaws if you have them right here to hold the PVC pipe, if you've got this. Any questions to this point? Okay. All right, now let's see if we can get this thing. That's a pretty neat idea. So the next thing is the cut PVC pipe. Now I looked online to try to find a Ferguson's Plumbing Supply. I found one in Dallas and one east of here somewhere. If you go to Ace Hardware and take one of these, I've got some examples I'm going to give you. You take the piece of pipe, it's thin-walled PVC pipe. I'm sorry, question? I believe it's the Schedule 20. It's the thin wall. But this is sewer pipe that they put in industrial buildings for going up to let vent and stuff like that. So if you use the thick 80 gauge stuff, it's way heavy. And I'm thinking about, again, about these little kids that's got to lift these things up, and you don't want them real heavy. So I made me a little storage stick right here. It's my PVC gauge, and I hang it by my saw. And I've got it roughly 5.5 to 6 inches. You can cut them any length you want, but if you get them too big, they look clunky. If you get them too small, they look squatty. Now, on the bell of the PVC pipe, it's going to be a little bit smaller. So to cut these things, normally I bring them home and I mark all of them, and I'll talk about that right now. And to mark those, I use just a regular band clamp, and this is a piece of aluminum that I put, it's about 1.25 inches wide. And after I mark my PVC all the way down the piece of pipe, then I'll put this on and I'll turn it up this way so you can see. I'll slide it down on either side and I'll tighten it back down and use a Sharpie and mark all the way around it. I'll do the complete piece of pipe. Normally I'll buy 2 or 3 pieces of pipe, mark them all at the same time. Pardon me. And then to cut it in half, I use this longer saw blade. It's 14 teeth per inch. And what you want to do, it's very handy if you have DB. You know who DB is? Dearly beloved? Oh. If you have somebody that helps you to turn the pipe as you're cutting it with a saw. You don't want to cut straight up and down. And what I do is I cut the pipe in half so it's easier to handle. And then I take it and I have, getting wrapped up. I have a machinist bandsaw and I have a sling, and then I'll cut with the bandsaw and turn this into the bandsaw blade. And you don't want to cut straight through, because if you could cut this on a big bandsaw, when you cut through, it'll crush here and it'll break the pipe. So you only want to cut a little bit at a time. And if you don't have a bandsaw, you can use a saber saw and cut it part way, turn it, cut it part way, turn it, cut it that way. And now they're going to cut off a little bit. And that's where the next thing is, you're going to clean those up. I will say that when you get the pipe, I don't know if we can see this, it's out in the plumber's yard, and it's very dirty inside and out. So after I trim these up, I will take them into the dry sink, and well, it's a wet sink actually, and I'll wash them with soap and water to get any dirt off of them. And then if you've got the labels like this, I just use acetone and wipe that off. Because the fabric that you use, sometimes that will show through, and you don't want to show through the fabric. So I'll cut, like I say, 2 or 3 10-foot pieces of pipe and get those done. Like I say, you can do this anyway, but you need to make your chucks first or figure out how you're going to do it. One of the nice challenges about wood turning is trying to figure out something different. And so now to true the ends up, since I already have my wooden chuck, how you doing, bud?
Great. I almost know what you're doing.
Yeah. It's scary. Talon, key. So I'll put this between the stronghold chuck and the Talon chuck, and I'll tighten both of them down, not a lot, but just sufficiently. Now, I got the tool rest. I'll use this one right here. Maybe, there we go. Now this is a 100 #1 tool. I'm sure you can other tools. Whoever wins that tool later, it's best to turn this tool on about a 30-degree angle, not directly flat. It cuts a whole lot better. Now let's see, I'm going to turn this down. I'm sorry? Yes. I'm just trying to get this thing turned on right now. There we go. Okay.
Well, that's water.
Yeah.
Way out of ground.
Okay, let's check it. Oh, that's the camera again. Yeah. So it's not quite centered right now. So normally what I'll do is I'll just turn the lathe on to make sure this is running true. Okay. Yeah. There's no pressure up here. So then, like I say, I'll normally... Yeah, when you cut them, they will cut a little bit crooked. So what you want to do is turn it on and see that it's running true. And like I say, the cutter I use is the #1 Hunter, and I put it at about a 30-degree angle. Even if the wood, it works a lot better. Now, I'll start this and show you why you need to use a vacuum if at all possible. Now, you see, this stuff gets everywhere. And you can tell by the way the thing sounds if it's cutting clean or not. And this stuff here just gets everywhere. But if you do have a vacuum, it will suck most of that stuff away. Okay, vacuum. And when you're turning, you can actually hear if it's chattering. It's not perfectly round. So the next thing that you want to do is screw up any ends. Okay. So there leaves a little burr on here. You never want to use a deburring tool. You can use a file or anything like that, but this is called a deburring tool, and you can get them at most machinist supply houses. And you just do this by hand, and you rotate your piece of PVC, and it takes care of that little burr on the edge. And then on the inside, you just do it by hand. And it's kind of nice if you still have the mark on there, it gives you a gauge to go by. So once you do that, you turn the piece around and then do the other end. Like I say, you can use different type of jumbo jaws for this. It just happens to be that, like I say, I'm frugal and I made my own jaws. Any questions to this point? And then you trim up this end. See, if you start right here, it gives you kind of a starting point and an end point, and then do the inside. And it's best, in my opinion, to go ahead and do a whole bunch of these. If you guys get a workshop on the weekend to do beads of courage, you can buy the PVC, and somebody can be cutting it, somebody can be trimming it, and things like that. And like I say, I'll pass this around and you can see the dirt on the inside. This one has not been cleaned. Okay, thank you. Now, the next thing you can do, like I say, you can do this in any steps that you want. I made this to hold the PVC, and you can spray the 3M77 on it. Or you can use, this is a spray adhesive, acid-free, high-tack. You can get it at the fabric stores. A lot of ladies use that. And this is 3M77. I normally use the 3M77. And that's the spray adhesive. So you can use this and spray the adhesive on there, get a nice good coat on it, and then you glue the fabric on it. And I'll talk about the fabric. Yeah, let me grab the piece there. Now, a lot of the ladies that do quilting, they buy fat quarters up in the top, fat quarters, and the dogs. They buy fat quarters. They come in and like this. This is called a fat quarter. And guys, this is kind of out of our realm. This way? This way? The puppies or dogs or whatever, they have all kind, I call them child-friendly fabric. It's not child-friendly at all, but it's something that kids will like. And you'll see some of those over there. There's the different type fabric that you can get from fabric stores. Walmart has some, different places. So it comes 34 by 36 inches, a square, something like that. And give me the cutters out of there, Jim. And then I take the DB's cutter, and this is the cutter I use, and there's a mat that you put it on and you cut the strips out of it. I'm not going to do that tonight, and this is what the strips would look like. This is just one piece right there. And you can glue on all these different pieces of fabric. Get them out of the way. So after you glue them on, this one's been glued on. I'll need the ruler out of there. And I use a pair of scissors, and I always cut on the left side. Because if you see how the scissors are, if you cut on the right side, you're leaving a gap. But if you cut on the left side, it cuts the fabric exactly true with the PVC pipe. Okay? And then I'll turn it around, and then I'll cut this side to get it true. And then I'll use a clamp and clamp this on the end of a table, and wherever these two match up, you'll be my clamp. Good. I'll hold this right here and then use this and cut across. See if I can do it without the, did we see that? And you gotta be careful of the cutter. Then you peel that away, and then you peel back to where this comes up, and then I use the clear Elmer's glue. It's kids glue they use in school, and I'll put a bead along the seam if I need to, put a little bit underneath, and then I'll press that down.
What is that called? Could you use an X-Acto knife?
Well, you probably could. This is a Frisca. It's in the fabric stores. You can get these. They're not that expensive, but it has that roller cutter in there, and it's very, very sharp.
Problem with the X-Acto knife, it tends to pull the fabric when you try to cut it.
And this rolls and cut it. There's a pad that goes underneath, so then I use that. And then after I do that, and that's dry, I'll do a whole bunch of these and leave that set up. And once it's dry, then I'll put PVC or the glue rather around the fabric in the PVC top. Let that dry for a few hours, turn it over and do the other side. It just helps hold the fabric together. If you've got any little frays or anything like that, it glues that together. So that's the PVC, it's done, fabric's glued on it, and you can go to different fabric stores and get what I call child-friendly fabric. Okay. Now, when it comes to doing the wood, I'll close that back down a bit. Any questions on the PVC?
They have hundreds of questions.
Yeah.
You see it in your eyes, you just don't know it yet.
If
Yeah.
you don't have that little tool to get your edges, sandpaper work, you know.
I'm sure you could use sandpaper and deburr the end of it. Like I say, just because I'm using this tool, you could probably use any tool in your arsenal. You could probably use a gouge, but keep it at a sharp angle so it don't catch into the pipe. I do both sides because when you cut it with a hacksaw, a bandsaw, or something like that, it's not going to cut perfectly true. I don't know if you could see it when I was turning it. It moved a little bit until I trued it up. Now I will tell you the PVC pipe is not perfectly round because it's been extruded. It's going to be a little bit different. I actually got one piece I wasn't paying attention really good, and there was some flat spots in it. I could still use it, but I had to compensate that when I cut the groove into the wood. So yes, it's not perfectly round at all.
Which one's yours?
Both of them. Yeah, the question was, PVC setting out in the plumbing yard, it will distort in the hot sun, especially here in Texas. Austin's even hotter than up here. Okay. Now, even though my handout on the PDF shows it a little bit different, I've changed my way, if you will, and I do the tops first, or the lids first. There's a reason for that, and I mark the lids on whatever wood you got. Mesquite's a beautiful wood, but if you got flat wood stock in your shop or studio, everybody's got a studio, right? Yeah, right. I got a cluttered up garage. But I mark it roughly, the lid is going to be 5 inches in diameter. And I'll take it to the bandsaw and I'll cut the corners off of it. It makes it a lot easier. You can turn the corners off, but it's so much easier to use a bandsaw. So I'll do, like I say, maybe 15 or 20 of those. And then this is cut on the bandsaw. And I use friction drive only. And let me get this over here. And you can use any tool that you've got. I'm using the Thompson, what is it, 5/8 gouge? I haven't measured it. I'm sorry? There's nothing on friction drive. It's just a piece of wood. If you take the extra time and put screws in there, it just slows things down. And of course, here's the line of fire. You never want to stand in the line of fire. You should always be wearing a face shield. This is a polycarbonate face shield. You'll see a lot of YouTube videos where people are using a splash shield. There's nothing on the bottom. So if something hits the bottom, it'll smash it right into the face. Lancaster. Dave Lancaster was turning one time, and a piece of wood came and smashed him in the face. Now he turns with a hockey mask, the wire hockey mask. I don't know if you need to go that big, but we had a couple new people here. You never stand directly in the line of fire. I try to always stand to the side, one side or other. Now I've never had, well, I had one piece of PVC that was cracked, but it didn't come off the lathe, it just spun. But on wood, especially if you're not sure that it don't have any checks or cracks in it, don't stand in line of fire. Now, I will say that this is a Thompson tool with a 20-inch handle. The reason I have the 20-inch handle is it's got ballast or shot in the bottom of it. And I use it at an acute angle way down. It'll give a peeling cut. If you hold it flat like this, it's tearing the cross grains of the wood. So I'll try to demonstrate that and show you what it looks like. So there again, I'm standing to the side, holding it down. I never go completely across the wood. If you go across the other end of the wood, it'll split out on that side. So then I'll come around here, and then I'll come back. Now this is the kind of shavings that you get with a tool and an acute angle. So if you take anything home today, that's one of the things to take home with you right there. Now, what's that?
Dust.
Oh, yeah, he's not supposed to be in dust, dirt, pollens, and kids. Because he just got cancer treatment. Here he is. So this here, if he was doing it, he would probably start standing with two rocks in the parking lot. I would start sanding this maybe with 180, 220, 320, and that's it on the outside. But on the lids like this, I normally don't sand any of it at this time, because what I'm going to do next is I'm going to set this up for a chuck. Now I know my Talon chuck diameter, I don't have to measure it, and I'm using the Hunter Viceroy tool. Get out of the way. This is to rough it out. With the Viceroy tool, because it's about a 30-degree angle down, I can cut in either direction. Now, once I get it, oh, camera. So once I get this partially hollowed out, what I want to do is put a tenon in here so I can hold it in my chuck. This is just a regular parting tool. And I'll do 10, 15, 20 of these at a time. I'm not worried about sanding the inside at this time, and I'll set those aside. And now to do the tops and bottoms is basically the same, and I have a larger friction drive right here that I use. Now one of the things I will say on this lathe and this right here, it's not going all the way next to the landing, if you will, so you might get a little bit of wobble on it. The same thing on the larger pieces of wood. I will mark for the top and bottom. They're basically identical. And I'll mark the outer ring, and I'll cut it with a bandsaw. That way I'm not having to knock those corners off with the lathe. Now only for the bottom, and I'll explain this why in just a minute, I will do the same thing here. Okay. Now lightly round the corner, not a lot. Same as on this end right here. Now, what I'll normally do here is I'll do a whole bunch of these, set them aside, and then I'll come back and sand them, usually 180, 220, 320. You can sand these to 600, 1200 if you want to, but that's just a waste of time in my opinion, because once you finish them, they're going to look perfect anyway. So then the same thing after I sand this, then I'll do the same thing for the bottom. I'll undercut it somewhat. And I'll use this same thing, the hunter tool. So what I'm doing here is I'm removing the mass of the wood. I'm thinking of these little children that's 2, 3, 4, 5 years old, and I don't want them to have a lot to pick up when they have the completed box. Now, one of the other things that you have to consider is to put the groove in there for the PVC pipe. So I made myself another type of storage stick. This is for the lid, the groove, and this is the outside for the top and bottom. And that's what I use to mark those. So you see I can put my compass in and find out where the groove for the top and bottom is. So now that I have the center point right here, I can take this out and I can mark where the groove's going to be for the PVC pipe. And you could have actually done that if you have the mark before. And then I use the parting tool. And I'll go in roughly 1/4 inch. And then I have a piece of PVC, such as this one with fabric already on it. Oh, look at that. And that's how the PVC fits in the groove. The top and bottom is exactly the same to this point. Okay? So now the top, I'll go back to that real quick, and then I'll do the top. So I'll mark the groove, since I've already got the mark in there. Do this in just a little bit different. On the top, I do not sand the outside at this time. Now let's see if the fabric fits. Yeah. So now the top and bottom, the groove is complete. Okay? Any questions to this point? Now sometimes I'll mix and match wood. You'll see over there on the table that I have different woods. You don't have to use all maple. I'm going to try to do some dyeing. And I've got a few of them over there that's dyed. I'm going to get all the primary colors, and I'm going to do this whole series in maple and use the same fabric with green, red, blue, yellow, purple, whatever. Okay, so this would be what the box kind of would look like. But now I have to fit the lid. And the reason I do it this way is I'll be able to mark where the lid goes. I've already got those lids complete. See if this works.
Use this one?
No, I'm going to use the other one. Need the Talon chuck, straight jaws. Now I'm going to demonstrate 3 different ways of doing the lid. There it is. Because I know, how many people have a vacuum system for your lathe? How many do not have a vacuum system? Okay, it's about 50-50, something like that. Well, you don't need a vacuum system to make the lid, but you do have to think about how you're going to proceed making that lid. Now, just for safety, I always bring up the tailstock, crank it out a little bit, and I want to shape my lid. Okay, I'll use the Thompson gouge. Like I say, you can use basically any tool in your arsenal. Now this is vibrating a little bit, which is okay. Ooh. I'm getting some terrible vibration on that. Now, one of the things that you want to do periodically is check your thickness of the lid. Right here I've got about 3/8 of an inch. That's probably why that was chattering just a little bit. So, depending on if you've got a vacuum system or not, if you do not have a vacuum system, leave this surface flat. That way you can use a double stick tape method to turn it. And I'm going to pretend that I've got this shaped and it's sanded, and I want to drill a hole for the knob. I can put this back on later and do that. So remember Johnny's way? I use a 1/2 inch Forstner bit to do this. You can use 9/16, you can use 5/8, but I guarantee you once you decide to use a 1/2 inch, you probably want to stick with a 1/2 inch. If you use 9/16, you might want to stick with it. Because when you make a bunch of these lids and have a 1/2 inch hole or 9/16, and then you start making knobs for it later, you got to remember which Forstner bit that you use. Ooh. Oh, that's not out all the way. There it goes. That's a self-ejected one. And turn your lathe down, and you want to drill in probably about 3/8 of an inch. It don't matter in a way which method that you use. Oh. Yeah, the face shield and the mic and my crooked head. But now if this was flat, you've got your hole in there for your knob. Now I can take this thing off and turn it around, and I'll show you the method for double stick tape. So if I have the double stick tape method, I'm going to do this way. Lock. Remember, that would be still on the Talon chuck. If not, if you don't have the that method there, you can. Now remember, this was flat right here on this side, and I drilled a hole in it. This side is completely sanded. It was on the Talon chuck. So now, to be safe, there again, I always bring up the tailstock. And then I go ahead and turn down the center. Now remember, that's double stick tape, so you want to be a little bit gentle with it. You don't want to really get rough. Now you notice with this tool I can cut push or pull. That's because it's at an angle. It's about a 30-degree angle. Now in theory, what I would do is go ahead and turn that completely off. And then I'd sand this. Then the lid is completely finished. That's a second method that you can use if you do not have a vacuum system. Tommy bar? Let's see. Now this might not work on this one. The third method that I don't think I'm going to be able to use it here. On my lathe at home, you can make a jam chuck with foam rubber on it. Because this has got a small hole in here, it won't work. But what I normally would do, and this is just another idea, and it works quite well. Use a 1/2-inch dowel and you put it in here until it goes all the way in. Now this would go into the Morse taper. It goes into Morse taper on my lathe, and if you had the 1 1/4 inch, it would go into that if you had the faceplate for that. And then it's the same thing with this tailstock up there. I cut it all away, and then I leave a little nub in there, and I'll sand this, and then by the pressure of the sanding, it will sand that little nub away. So it's another option that you can use if you want to go this route. So there's 3 different ways, and obviously the vacuum, and we'll set that up real quick, is the easiest way if you have it. If you don't have a vacuum system, those are 2 ways. Oh yeah, I'm not going to be able to use this because, yeah, I can, but I'll have to take both those off. That's that screw. It's always fun going to another club with a completely different lathe and trying to figure out how to do something different. I think there's enough room in here. If not, we'll just try it anyway. So with this vacuum system, am I losing the mic again? Yeah, there it goes. That on there and the nut on. We'll see if it'll work. Of course, if you're using this lathe and your vacuum chuck that you have, it would probably work just fine. Let's see if they go all the way. Oh yeah, sweet. Now, here it is. I drilled and tapped these so that if I do anything in reverse, it won't come flying off. For a club lathe, it's not that important. So now, where's that? If you have the vacuum system, where when you have the hole in the top and it's completely finished, bring it up here and turn your lathe on just lightly here and turn the vacuum on, and we have vacuum. I will turn that off right now. So now you could sand and finish this outside. And likewise, off, didn't bleed it. Likewise, if you had the other piece of wood sanded and finished right here with a vacuum, you can always bring it up like this, turn your vacuum on, and finish it this way. Any questions on that part right there? Pretty straightforward. Okay. Now, I've done this completely in a different manner than what's in the PDF, but the thing is, you get the idea. Nah, I need to knock that off. Tommy bar. Will it work? There you go. Now, the top and bottom, like I say, ding, 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 ding. Oh.
Do you worry about the top and bottom not being perfectly the same diameter? Or you just figure
They're going to be really close. Really close. They might be a hair off because of turning one and then the other one. I'm going to take the rotary adapter off for the vacuum. Assembly line production makes it a lot easier if you do 4, 5, 10 of them at one time. If you do one, as you well know, you've got the setup. There you go. The setup time is detrimental to getting a lot done, but if you're just a hobbyist like I am, it don't matter. Okay, put that there. So now, to do the top and bottom is where I go back to the jumbo jaws. I'm not you could use a vacuum to do the bottom, but not the top. Okay.
Which one you want?
This one right here. So to do the bottom, remember I've already got the outside sanded. All right, mask and let me use that tool. Let's hit the vacuum. Okay, for the bottom, what I would normally do is go ahead and turn this nub away. Completely sand this side, because the outside on this would be sanded. Then I take it and turn it around. Now, if that nub is proud, it could hit your jaws and cause a warp. This one don't. So I turn it around. Now do the same thing here. I bring the tailstock up for that extra support and safety. And what I wanted to have a concave bottom. You don't want to have a bottom that's convex. You want to be able to set. You notice that the live center is not turning. That's quite all right because it's just there as an added safety feature. And once I get this concave rather, I'll take the parting tool and I'll put a couple of signature grooves in. Actually, probably what I do is after I do that, I'm going to leave that on there right now. I would take this and sand it completely. I'd get down about 180, 220 and then put the signature grooves in, sand it 220, 280, 320. then the bottom is complete. Any questions on that part? Talon Chuck. Put that back over there. So the top is a little bit different story. So we already have our signature groove in, or our PVC groove in this side here. So we want to put it face down. And this is what's different than the PDF. I found this is a lot easier if you do it this way, because then you marry your lid to the top. Now I mark that with an awl. Turn the lathe speed down a little bit. And I just take the awl and mark it. Now this is not the exact diameter that this lid's going to be. And I keep this lid with this top. And I'll keep this top and bottom lid together. So, number them, whatever. And I will use a parting tool or something to put a little divot right here in the center. Okay. Now what I do next is keep this up here just as safety, and I'll take the parting tool and I'll part in more than halfway or guesstimated halfway. And I'm not cutting to that line where the awl was at. Now the next trick is you want to match the back side with the front side for the lid. So you use your compass and gauge where the rim is. Did you see that? I did it kind of quick. So you want to measure where your parting tool cut's going in. Now this part here was not sanded. The reason is I'm going to shape that a little bit different for the lid. So then I'll mark where that cut was on the back side. And that's per my story stick, wherever it went to. This one right here, for the lid. So this is just a safety feature here. And normally what I'll do is I'll turn the lathe down a little bit so when I cut through, it'll just spin. That way it stops spinning.
Now, what do you do with all those?
What you can do with these right here is if your first cut like this, you can make this a lid for another box. Now, what I like to tell folks is, if your guys, not you ladies got delicate hands. If your guy's fist can go through the opening right here for the lid, a child will be able to reach in and get the beads. In other words, you don't want to have the hole in the top of the box like 2 inches. That would have to pick the whole box up and dump it out. So, and also, once you do this, the next time you get it a little bit smaller, you can make coasters out of them. You can buy the corks from different places, maybe Hobby Lobby and places like that, and make coasters out of them for drinks. I think that's in that handout or the PDF. Now, this right here is where it starts to become freehand a little bit. Put those over there. I want to make sure that this right here is dovetailed, if you will. So I'll turn the lathe back up just a little bit, and I'll come in here at an angle. And the reason I want to dovetail is I'm going to be using those Talon jaws now. Remember I made them earlier? So at home I have my 2 chuck keys close to the lathe. Here, I gotta look for them. I know. You're doing a mighty fine job. Okay, this one. I've made several sets of jaws. I'll pass these around. Be real careful, don't get poked on the wire. That's a set of jaws that I've used them for different things. No, I don't need Talon. So because I've dovetailed this, I'll turn this around and expand my Talon chuck until it holds. Now, this is the time I want to fit my lid. So I'll look at this right here and I'll sneak up on it, because remember I cut in a little bit here. I didn't want the lid to fit to begin with. And I'll check and see if the lid fits. Nope, a little bit more. Really close. Might do this a couple different times until it fits. Oh yeah. Now one of the things, you want to have a little bit of play in your lid, because wood moves. And if this lid would be so tight, that would be press fit, and then the moisture from this place or somewhere else, and if the lid was setting like 90 degrees from the grain pattern, it could swell and the kids couldn't get the lid off. And remember, these are for kids. We want them to be able to pick the lid up easy. So that's why I leave that a little bit loose. Now, for a little bit more safety, I will leave the lid on and I'll start contouring the outside. This one. Here again, I'm trying to remove some of the mass so that the box is a lot lighter. Now about this point, what I want to stop and check, you remember I've got that groove in there for the PVC? I want to make sure that I have plenty, where we got? Plenty of thickness right here that I don't cut through. It's kind of sad when you make a second ring and don't plan on it. Don't ask me how I know that. And then the other hunter tool. I'll come from the back side, round this over, and this is where, if it looks kind of thick and clunky, you can turn it down to make it more delicate. There, I'm holding this probably about a 30-degree angle. It's kind of like a negative at rake scraper. Now the last thing I want to do is, because this is vibrating a little bit right here, just the nature of wood, I'll remove this and come back around here and just take off just a little bit right here. That trues it up. Now, one of the things that you cannot do is sand this with power. This is one of the 2 places that you got to hand sand. You try to power sand in here, it'll catch the wood and it just tears it up terribly. So, and where's my sanding stuff? Have you seen it, Jim? Anyway, sandpaper, sandpaper. Yeah, I did. So, high speed and sanding is not good. You want to turn your lathe down when you sand and have your vacuum system going and a dust mask. Now, I usually wear a dust mask at home, and I'll pass this around. Don't open it up. Please don't put it on. You don't want my germs in your face. This is from Vincent Welch. He'll be a SWAT. They're 1995, and it's a Defender dust mask. Hello. And it works really great. It has the ports that goes out the bottom, and my glasses don't fog up. Well, I do want that back. I don't think you want to wear it. So one of the things I do is I'll power sand the outside of this because I can do that. But on the inside, I have the vacuum running. Turn the lathe speed down. And then I sand with my finger, really careful on the flat surface on the bottom. I go through all the grits. This is Aberneth paper. It's kind of like screen wire. Works really good. Like I say, at home I'll have the dust mask on, my full face shield. But here, since I have the vacuum going, I want to be able to show you what's going on here. Now once that happens, then you want to reverse the lathe and sand the other flat spot where the lid's going to set. I just go through the grits just a little bit. It takes off any of the tool marks. Any questions on sanding that part right there? So, yeah, I'm going to sand this. I'm going to sand the outside because once I turn this around, I won't be able to put it back on. I need to do that. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm normally sand in both directions, and I'll go through all the grits. At least the first few grits I'll switch rotation because if you have any grain pattern, it'll smooth it out. Regular sandpaper don't seem to do it as much. I know I got regular sandpaper here. Yeah, where's that? Can you still hear me okay, or am I lost it? All right, I knew I had it here. But let me use Aberneth right now. That'll work. Okay. Sometimes I'll stop about 150, 180, and if there's any tear out or anything like that, then I'll pay a little particular attention to that, and then sand that out and then continue sanding. And the reason that you have to sand this right here is when I turn this around, I'm going to undercut the bottom here, which will make it easier for the kids to pick up. There again, I'm thinking about these small children and picking up their boxes. Here again, when you're doing this, if you want to make sure you got solid wood. If you got cracks in it and you're putting super glue in there, that's a dangerous situation. So make sure you have good sound wood. And what can go wrong could go wrong. So here again, I'm using a light touch. This is a place you don't want to get really aggressive. You can use a bowl gouge on this. You can use a negative rake scraper. Whatever you have that works for you. What's nice about these Hunter Viceroy tools, I can cut in both directions. And here I'll just want to true this end up a little bit. Now I found with maple, a lot of times it will pull a little bit on you and you'll have a rough area. But there again, sanding, you sand in both directions to start with. And that's where a dust mask would be beneficial right now. One of those do as I say, don't, not as I do things. At home I have my vacuum system right back there. And it actually takes most of it away, but I have that sanding dust mask on, which protects my lungs. Everybody knows what spalted wood is, right? Partially rotted. If you get that fungus in your lungs, it can just, well, back kill you. You get pneumonia. A guy in our club several years ago, James Papel, he got pneumonia, went to the hospital, and the doctors couldn't figure out what was wrong. True story, by the way. And he went back home after they got him well, and a few days later, he was back in the hospital just as bad as he was. Doctor said, "What are you doing?" He said, "Well, I'm turning some spalted hackberry." I don't know if it's hackberry, whatever. They said, and the doctor knew about wood fungus and stuff like that. He says, "Well, that's getting you in your lungs. It's just causing you to die. Don't do that anymore. Use a dust respirator and dust mask." So I have what's called sanding wax right here. And this area right here that's pulled out a little bit, if you take some of this sanding wax and rub into the grain where it pulled a little bit, and then go back and sand, it will sand a whole lot smoother. This is nothing more than mineral oil and beeswax. You can use canuba wax also. Yes, I made it my own. You can buy sanding wax it's expensive, and it's really easy. If you Google sanding wax, I think it comes up with a recipe. Captain Eddie in Louisiana, he comes to SWAT, had an article about making sanding wax. It works. And you should be using sandpaper like Jimmy paid for it. He definitely does not need to be over here in this stuff. I probably should have kept that dust mask until we was done. And normally I stop at 320. You can go as high as you want. One of the things about the inside right here, nobody's going to be reaching down in and looking. They can't see, so all they can do is feel. and with that sanding wax, it'll pretty well smooth that out. Now, like Jim said, these are married together with the bottom would be married together. So this now would be a completed lid, top and bottom. The next thing is to make a knob. Any questions on this part? A lot of that's in that handout on the PDF that you've got. If you have flat wood stock, it's a great way to use it up. Okay. Now, one of the things I found out with the wooden jaws on here, I'll take this to the air compressor and blow the dust out, because a lot of times it acts like a fan. It'll pull the dust into the gears, and it'll bind up after a while. What do you look for?
There's
The lid, all that
what
right.
you're talking
Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm gonna take this off for right now. Do we have a knockout bar somewhere for this? Oh, there it is, okay. How are we doing on time? Who's sleeping back here? I see that. Right. Okay. Yes. Go ahead.
Those little jaws that you were sending around a few minutes ago, what are the extra two little holes?
Hey, I made some square earring ornaments, and I had little bars across there, and I cut little squares of maple and held it and hollowed them out on each side, so that the little cube ornament earrings was really lightweight. That's what those extra holes were. Somewhere in my studio, I've got those little bars in a jar. So if I want to make some more cubed ornaments, I can do that. You hold each one and you undercut each side of it, and then you drill the hole in the center, so they're very lightweight. And you can color them. You can make them out of mesquite or different woods. Okay. To make the knobs, we'll get through this, I hope, real quick. I've got another spur drive in here. There it is. I'll explain this more than actually doing it. For SWAT each year, we make a platter or something for the 2-for-1 drawing. Now it's what, 3-for-1? So out of the corner of this 16-inch platter, I have the corners, which would be kind of like this. Because it's 16 inches, I can cut down here and get 2 knobs, and I can get another knob this way.
It's pointed back instead of in your ear.
What is my, my,
I'm not sticking my finger in your ear.
I'll follow you anywhere. Hate the hearing aids. So that's where I get the, some of the wood for knobs, and there's a bag over them up there, and I've dyed several of them different colors. Now obviously you can't use this, but on a bigger platter I can use those. So what I do is turn them between centers. I just laid that down, didn't I? No, I put it in there. I put it between centers. I made a mess here. And then after it's between centers, there's a little trick. Oh, okay. There's a little trick right here that I do. You get this all set up. I knocked the corners off. This was square at one time. And then, where's my wrench set? There they are.
I knew what you were after.
So remember the hole that I made in the lid, the 1/2 inch, and where's my drill chuck that's got this? You can get these wrench sets from Harbor Freight. They come in a set of metric and standard SAE wrenches. And they got these little rings that you can put them on. So if you use a 1/2 inch wrench and you measure, remember how I said I drill in about 3/8 of an inch or less? That's probably a little more than a quarter, but I drilled 3/8 to give myself a little bit of glue squeeze out. So you can use that. Of course, me being a hacker of all things, I make my own wrenches, or my gauges, if you will, 1/2 inch, 3/8, 3/4, and 5/8. Pardon me. So to turn this down, this might show a little bit better right here. This is a fluteless gouge. I'll pass that around in just a little bit. So I want to turn this down roughly to 5/8 to start with, because that's what's going to be held in the chuck. I use a little bit different chuck to do this. Now, if I was gauging that, I got 5/8 here. I can see that that's just about the depth for my Forstner bit. One of the other things I'll do is take a little skew and undercut this just a little bit. And I'll do a little bit more later. So then with the fluteless gouge, I can reshape it a little bit more, refine it. Now on that right there, because that's going to be setting up next to the chuck, a lot of times I'll just take some sandpaper and sand right here where this is going to be next to the chuck, just to smooth it out a little bit. The fluteless gouge does a wonderful job on that, and I'll pass that around in a little bit. So I'll do maybe 15, 20 of these. If I'm going to color them, I might do more than that. So now, there again, it's not an assembly line per se, but it definitely speeds up the process. Chop, 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 chop. Oh. Now I got to put that adapter back on. Okay. Any questions to this point? Okay. Now, if I'm going to put a bead in this, I'll turn this knob around and put the knob in like this, and then I'll drill the hole. And I use here's the problem with the beads. In the box, there's some beads. One time they used to have the beads was perfectly 3/4 inch. And then they changed them to metric or something like that. And then they changed them again. So maybe they're over here, Jim. So yeah, I've got some of them over here. So what I went to online and ordered a 22 millimeter drill bit, a 21 millimeter drill bit, a 20 millimeter drill bit, because if you gauge the beads, one time you get them, they'll be 21 millimeter. Next time they'll be 22. So I've got kind of frustrated with that. And where did I put the ones I had the tops beads of courage on? Beads of courage.
You're talking about the drawing?
Yeah, the drawing. and actually the beads themselves. So I also made a fixture that I cut the beads in half with, because this is kind of, there's a bit. So if I'm going to put the beads in there, I'll hold this in the chuck and I'll drill to the depth of half the bead plus a little, because I'm going to use silicone in here to glue the beads in. So I cut the beads in half with a Dremel tool and a skewer. I don't see it. But Dremel tool, the diamond bit, the mandrel for this is $13 and the bit is $26. You can get them online for $22. So I'll put the bead in this little fixture, and it's in the handout. I'll put this in here and I'll use a skewer and I'll cut half in two. There's one in here, I know there is. I got a bead that's already half. I mostly cut. Anyway, I don't know where it went to. And I'll cut through here, turn the bead over, and cut it in half this way. Then the beads are $20 for $25 from Beads of Courage in Tucson, Arizona. Right now, they're out of the beads. They don't know when they're going to get the next shipment. I'm on a list. When they get them, they're supposed to call me, and I'll order another 60 beads. So by cutting them in half, am I really saving anything by the time I buy the Dremel and the diamond bit? The little ones, it's about 3/4 inch, they don't last hardly at all. I can cut between 40 and 50 beads with one of these cutters. So I'm not really saving anything. I have twice as many beads, so it kind of balances out. If you're putting one bead per box, and you can do that, drill a deeper hole in the knob, you can definitely do that, but you're spending more money per box. Now, another thing, and I know I've got them here, I've got the lids that's got the pyrography on it and the colors. Well, go get them, please. So the next thing I've decided to do, and I'll show you how to do this knob in a little bit, but I'll drill this out. Now, if I'm not going to put a bead in the knob itself, I will skip that, and then let's see, I need to turn that down. I'll have to do a little bit different technique. I'd have to put that back in there. So what I do is I hold the bead in the chuck like this. This is a Bulldog chuck from Paul Judkins that comes as SWAT. Love them. I've used those. I've wore out like 4 of the little chucks from Craft Supply. I've wore them out. These here are very good. So I never glue the knobs in until I make the lid with the box. That's why these knobs are not glued in. So this is the next thing that I do. I don't put a bead in the knob. I've made these templates, and what you can do on that is you take your compass and you mark 2 circles on your wood. And then if you're good with pyrography, you can do the wood burning around it, and then you can lay one of these templates on there, and then you can trace with graphite paper. Do not use carbon paper. Graphite paper. You get that at Hobby Lobby, Michael's, places like that. And then you trace that on there, and then it makes it look good if you use pyrography and outline it. And because the Beads of Courage has...
Is that what you're looking for?
No, I was looking for one of these that had a skewer in it. Because the Beads of Courage... I'm not showing it good. There you go. Over on that side. It's colored. Then I color the beads the same color. The of and courage is always black. So that's an option. And I think I'm going to go with this way. The organization, if you go to their website, encourages Beads of Courage on the box someplace. So this is a great way of doing it. And with a little bit of artistic skill, which I'm not, my wife does it. I can't even draw a straight line with a ruler. she does that for me, and I think I'm going to go this way a lot more. But there's another way of doing the knobs if you want to put a knob in there. There again, you can do it a 1/2 inch, a 5/8, or 9/16 or whatever. So that's how to make my knobs. I didn't do one because I'd have to take this back out, and I could put this in there and I could turn it away. And if you do like he did, drop the bead on the floor after you cut them in half, they'll break. If they're not, if they're not cut in half, they normally won't break. But if they cut in half because of the hole in the middle, they'll break right away. What's that?
I said, you got that knob?
Yeah, I got this knob, so you put that back on. I'm gonna pass these around, like say, you can look at them. This is iridescent paint on this one here. And there again, reason the knobs are not glued in there, I want to marry that to a top. And I could use a maple knob on mesquite, hackberry, pecan, or mix them up. You don't have to use all the same. But I want to do a whole series of colors like that. I was going to talk about this gouge right here. It's called a fluteless gouge. Doug Thompson makes these. It's almost impractical. It's very hard to get a catch. If you get a catch, you put this top edge too low, it'll catch. It's like a skew, but it's very, very forgiving. And actually comes with a handle, and the handle makes it about this long. It was too long for doing the knobs, so I made a wooden handle with a set screw in it, so the tool actually comes back into here somewhere.
Is that also called like a scoochy gouge?
It's kind of like a scoochie gouge, but a scoochie gouge is cut from the top down to the middle. This is chamfered from, if you call it chamfered, is from the polish from the bottom up. And I've not had to sharpen this yet. So I'll pass this around and look at it. And he has those in the 3/8. That is a 3/8 one. He has them in a 1/4 inch. He don't advertise these. I called him direct because I was doing beads of courage and doing the finials on Christmas ornaments, and these are really sweet doing beads and coves. But of course, this one I've rounded a little bit more, and it's even more forgiving. And Doug will be at SWAT, so if you're interested in that, you might want to let him know ahead of time that you want a 3/8, a 1/2 inch. I'm not sure if he makes one bigger than that or a 1/4 inch. And those, that is 1/4 inch. Yeah. And they're really sweet for doing these knobs. It's like this one right here. Let me take it out of it to Chuck. I'll better pass around. I don't think you can see it too good. Oh, here you can see the detail work that I did on it. And that was with that 1/4 inch. So I'll pass that around. And we'll pass this one, these two around. These, well, this one's almost like that. They're not sanded. One of them needs to be sanded more, and then they're ready to either finish or dye or whatever color. So basically, that's how I do the beads of curried boxes. But it's so much easier to do several at a time. As you do one, there's a lot of changeover, setup. But the best part is to think about the finished product and think about these little kids that needs a smile. And we've delivered those, and I tell the folks that help deliver the boxes, if you got to cry, go out and haul. Don't cry in front of the kids. And some of us has went out and there's been a few tear jerkings. It affects it. One of the things I will talk about, I didn't put it on at home. I have a different smock. When you are out in your studio, we all have a studio, wear some kind of a smock so when you get done, you can take the dirt, dust, and stuff like that and leave out in the studio. And this is my turning smock for demonstrations. Somewhere on here is a Hunt County patch. Right in the middle. That's because I come up here several years ago. Now, last thing I've got a box of, I think, 24 pieces of the PVC pipe. I've got a box right here of fabric. We'll put them over on that table. There's all kind of different fabric. And if you're inclined to make some PVC boxes with flat wood stocking like this, take the PDF. Remember, I did it different here. Do it your way. It's easiest to do the lid first to the top. Top and bottom is basically the same, except for the, you got to put a lid on there. And have fun. I hope to see a lot of them at SWAT. We'll put these over on a table. I'll take them out of the box, Jim. Help yourselves. And if you got any questions, please let me know. All right. Thank you. Just after 9. Of course, I would do a lot of sanding and stuff, but I wanted to get all these points across to you.